So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the governing body. This is session 3. In your order paper, we are now on agenda item 15, which is the Church in Wales safeguarding policy. You have a paper, the 2020 Church in Wales safeguarding policy. It is, of course, headed agenda 18, but that's the old numbering from the postponed September meeting. So, but that's the paper that relates to this item. There is a motion which you have in your order paper. I won't read that out. You've all got it before you. This motion is being proposed by the Archbishop. So, Your Grace, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody, from me. Very important issue indeed, to which we have to respond very positively. I have two starting points in proposing this motion. That's first of all to remind members of governing body that when Simon Lloyd and I appeared at the ICSAR inquiry to give evidence, we were there as the representatives, the spokespeople for the Church in Wales as a whole, and not representing 6 divergent dioceses. That's an important point to make. It is the Church in Wales that will be held to account in relation to anything relating to safeguarding. Then, in terms of the history of our safeguarding policy, the present policy dates back to 2016. It was revised in 2018, but it's really now in need of proper revision, not only because of the lapse of time, but also because of comments made in relation to ICSAR. And not only must it be now revised, but it must also be in a position whereby it can be regularly reviewed. So there are the two important starting points. The ICSAR inquiry, which held the Church in Wales to account, and the fact that the policy is due for an overhaul. In relation to the policy, and again, I think this is something which emerges from ICSAR, one of the things that is very important is that we need to separate matters of policy from matters of detailed guidance and procedures. And the intention is that we have a policy written as carefully and as succinctly and as clearly as possible, but that will be supported obviously by other material which will relate to procedures and also in relation to guidance. Then it's important for me to say that the policy as laid before you has the full support of the People Committee of the representative body. It has the full support of the trustees of the representative body and the full support of the standing committee. So this is something which carries the weight, as it were, of the whole of the Church in Wales. That's, as it were, setting the scene. I want then, if I may, to turn to the motion before you and say something about its 3 constituent parts. First of all, of course, it recognizes the huge amount of work that has gone in already to the preparation of the policy. It recognizes the importance of having safe practice, and therefore it applauds the hard work that has been done by so many people to bring the policy before you now. And then it requires us, if we approve or pass this motion, to do 2 things. One is to adopt the safeguarding policy, and I quote from the motion itself, as the safeguarding policy for the whole Church in Wales. It will be our policy, and it's not one, therefore, that ought to be modified or, if I can put it as bluntly as this, tinkered with it in any way outside a provincial framework. So it's for us as a province as a whole. And going back to where I began, that is what ICSAR would expect of us and demand of us. And then in relation to the third element in the motion, that we are asked to remit the policies to dioceses, ministry or mission areas for adoption and implementation. Again, I emphasize, not for local modification. If there are areas of the policy which people feel require modification in any way, shape or form, then obviously that is something which they are free to draw to the attention of our safeguarding professionals and others at the provincial office. But I do urge that if we actually do pass this motion and send the policy out into the dioceses and the ministry areas, that we bear that in mind. It should not be locally modified, but comments in relation to any particular modifications that might be thought necessary be drawn to the attention of those who have the ways, the means and the capacity to do that. This is, as I began by saying, exceptionally important area. We owe it to all who come through our doors, all with whom we engage, that we provide safe church, safe places and proper accountability. And it's on that basis that it gives me pleasure to propose the motion before you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Grace. Thank you. And this is being seconded by Mr. James Turner.
James Turner, I second the motion formally.
Thank you very much indeed. So this is now open for debate. Please, could I remind you of what I said this morning? When you introduce yourself, please say where you are from, as well as your name, and put your hands up on the hands up device in plenty of time so that Simon Lloyd is able to call you in order. So I'll hand over to Simon to call people in the appropriate way.
Thank you, Chair. I call Elizabeth Thomas.
Elizabeth Thomas, elected lay St. David's Diocese, Archbishop, members of the governing body. I welcome the safeguarding policy, and this is a matter which is quite close to my heart because I spent 35 years or over 25 years working with the perpetrators of abuse as well as the victims. And one of the things that I think I want to say is that any policy is only as good as the people on the ground, really. And it depends, a lot of this depends on the first person that an abused person goes to and the reaction of that person. And you can't have that in a policy. It's difficult. But it's very problematic because somebody will approach you who is subjected to abuse, who won't come out with it. And it's often only by very careful conversation and being gently listening to what they say that you suddenly realize what they really are trying to tell you. And one of the things that you have to be able to do when somebody approaches you who feels they've been abused is that you actually have to think the unthinkable, because it never fails to amaze you what one human being can do to another. And many people find it very, very difficult to believe what somebody might be telling you. And even though I worked with abusers and perpetrators of abuse for years and years, I still came across things that I just found it so hard to believe. Not that I didn't believe the person who was telling me, but it just seemed so awful that you didn't want to believe it. So it's totally understandable if somebody finds it difficult to accept what they're being told. So the important thing is that we have to ensure that every safeguarding officer in every LMA is properly trained. And I really welcome the fact that St. Padden's is now putting on this training, and I and I will attend my first training event on Friday. But training is not a one-off experience. You don't go through training and then you know what to do. And I think it's very important that we make sure that people in LMAs are constantly reminded, I think, of responsibility. And I have to say that a lot of perpetrators are very, very clever. And I have spent most of my working life working with people who were on parole, who'd come out of prison. And one of the first things they would do was go off towards a church because they believed that the people in the church would be kind to them. And sometimes it was all right, but most of the time it wasn't. And we have to be very alert to people who present themselves, want to run different organizations and whatever. But I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it's the people on the ground, it's the people who are there in the LMAs who need to be alert, and we need to make sure that as many people as possible are actually trained in safeguarding. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, I call Linda Tyler-Lloyd, and that will be followed by calling Henry Shepherd.
Oh, Your Grace, governing body, thank you. This leapt out at me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Right, all right then. Linda Tyler-Lloyd, elected Swansea to the Swansea from Swansea. Thank you. This leapt out at me. This recognised the importance of promoting safer practices for children and adults. This leapt out at me because I have had to do a course on safeguarding because of my work on the Swansea Council. And strangely enough, some neighbours came to me, different neighbours came to me because they had concerns of someone in the neighbourhood. And I had tried to step in and help this person who was failing in looking after herself. And it was a terrible situation. Nobody would take it up. And because I had done this safeguarding and whose responsibility is it, and it's everybody's responsibility, I was able to go to the head of the Swansea Council and get some action done. And this person is being cared for and looked after, and everybody is breathing a sigh of relief. So what I really want to say is, yes, it is important. I know it's a different situation because we're talking about the church here, but when it says that it's everybody's responsibility, I think that's what we've got to be careful about. It's so easy to think this isn't my problem. So it's everybody's problem. And I'm very pleased that this has come before us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, I call Henry Shepherd.
Henry Shepherd, lay elected member from Llandaff. I think that this builds upon, but adds to what the previous speakers have been saying, that the success or failure of this will depend on how well it is communicated to those who are going to put it into practice. And specifically with detailed guidance on the precise nature of how it should be done in different situations. For example, guidance for how to apply safeguarding policy when working alongside another denomination or organisation. For example, how can we in the Church in Wales work with others in a safe way? So unless people on the ground understand very clearly how they're going to put this into practice, and unless it's communicated widely and repeatedly, then my fear is that as good a policy as I think it is, and I support it fully, it may not be the success which we all hope that it is. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
Chair, I call Timothy Llewellyn, and after that I'll be calling Rose Hill.
Tim Llewellyn, elected lay St David's. Your Grace, members of governing body, there's little really that I can add to Liz Thomas's very eloquent and compelling support to this motion. Her point regarding training and the need for ongoing development is key and so very important, and this motion carries my wholehearted support.
Thank you.
I call Rose Hill.
Rosemary Hill, elected clergy diocese of Llandaff, Your Grace, and members of governing body. I just want to reiterate my support for this safeguarding policy. However, I'd also like to flag up, among others, the need for clear training with safeguarding, especially with regard to the confessional and confidentiality. You know, from my own point of view, I felt my training as an ordinand was lacking in this, and it was something that I felt ill prepared for as I entered into curacy. Thankfully, I had an excellent training incumbent who was able to equip me, but I'm not sure that that always is the case, especially with different traditions and things like that. So I think there needs to be an addressing by the Church in Wales on training of taking confession, confessional etiquette, and also on the nature of confidentiality for clerics and also lay ministers. And that's all I'd like to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next chair I call Andrew Sims, and after that I shall be calling Robert Evans.
Your Grace, members of the bench, and my brothers and sisters at governing body. I want to make sure, I want to encourage us all to remember that we do often get drawn into considerations specifically regarding children and young people. And I recognise the importance of this and the many ways in which we've let our young people down historically. But I also want to make sure that we're drawing attention in our training to all of the protected characteristics and the vulnerable people in our society, and not missing any training opportunity to make sure that we're making adequate provision for safeguarding training for all of those characteristics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I call Robert Evans.
Thank you, Your Grace. Governing body, Bob Evans, lay member from Monmouth. Drawing on my experience as an HR director for a county council, I thought this was an excellent policy, but an obsession of mine from those days is actually about enforcement. I would be interested to hear just what the legal status of this document is from the point of view of if somebody breaches it, what action can we take as the Church in Wales against that person or that body which is not conforming? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I call Heather Payne.
Thanks, Heather Payne, lay elected Llandaff. Completely support this, having this policy. I think it's absolutely vital. We can't afford not to, in every sense of the word, both in the human kind of outcomes of the devastating effects of abuse, grooming, abuse of various sorts on children, but also on adults at risk, and again emphasising the importance of understanding, particularly in the church context, the possibility of spiritual abuse. And I wonder, we've got it in a footnote, but I wonder whether it needs to appear in the list of forms of abuse specifically for us as a church. But my main question is around the whether or not we need to actually have a phrase around recording. If I read the ICSA reporting about us as the Church in Wales, rightly, it's actually, I thought we came out quite well, but they did criticise our recording arrangements and record keeping, and I just wonder whether we need to say something about that. But I completely support the importance. And just as a brief anecdote, having spent a lifetime doing safeguarding professionally, I was both astonished, horrified, and amazed to realise that we actually had an abuser attending our church for a while. This is all material in the public domain and has been in the newspapers. And I realised had left our church and gone to another one because there was no opportunity to continue any grooming, which I've retrospectively recognised had been attempted. So it is still around, it's still with us. It is eternal vigilance that we must exercise, but part of making sure of that is having being able to actually keep an accurate record, so that with hindsight we can both protect and learn. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
There are no more hands raised at the moment, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. In which case, I will hand back to the Archbishop for the reply.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And thank you to everybody who's made their comments. I'll endeavour to respond as briefly as possible. Elizabeth, thank you for reminding us that there's always a need to revise policies to keep them up to date, to remind people of their responsibility to ensure that we keep our churches as safe places, and to make sure that the training is fit for purpose. That's bound to be one of our major concerns. And let me emphasize what I said at the beginning, that the policy is something which will be reviewed and revised ongoingly, as indeed will guidance and procedures. Linda, thank you for reminding us of something that's so important, everybody's responsibility. It's an adage, I think, attributed to Edmund Burke, that the only thing that is necessary for something evil to happen is for good people to do nothing. And so it's important that we understand we all share a responsibility for this. We mustn't abdicate that to others, but obviously we have to know how to react to a particular situation. Hence, training and guidance is important. And that brings me on to Henry's contribution, that success or failure will depend upon people understanding what to do in a given situation. Hence the importance of ongoing effective communication and training. Timothy, I think basically you already taken words out of my mouth. You emphasized points that others had been made, but thank you for giving your support to that. Rose, in relation to the confessional, you will recognize, as indeed others will, that this is an extremely sensitive area. Our own prayer book makes provision for what we will call confession under the oath of secrecy, the historic oath of secrecy. And there is divergence between the churches, particularly the Roman Catholic Church and some of the Anglican churches, as to how that is to be treated. But clearly, it is an area that requires both administrative and obviously theological attention. If you want my own personal view, it's one that I articulated at the ICSA inquiry. It is no secret that I think that holding in your mind the knowledge that somebody has perpetrated abuse upon an individual, vulnerable individual in any category, is not consonant with the gospel. The Lord said that anybody who causes one of these little ones to suffer will bear the consequences. And I think we have to put that into practice. But that is a view I expressed at this stage personally. But it's somewhere where training will obviously be needed. Andrew, yes, there are many categories of people with characteristics that render them vulnerable, and it's important that we bear all those individuals in mind and don't only focus on particular groups. Bob, in the matter of enforcement, if I can remind you of the bill that we passed earlier on, relating to safeguarding and discipline. We revised that, and in the canon as it now is, somebody could be the subject of a complaint for failing to comply with advice from a provincial safeguarding panel without reasonable excuse. In terms of a particular example of conduct, then already in the disciplinary procedure, we have a provision where somebody can be subject to discipline for perpetrating conduct giving just cause for scandal or offence. And there are the various categories laid out in that canon as we've now passed it, as to who can be held accountable. It doesn't cover everybody though. So equally, we need to remember that we have to cooperate with other statutory authorities and voluntary bodies in ensuring that if we become aware of something, it's properly reported. And if we have the capacity in-house also to deal with it, then obviously that we deal with it in-house. Heather, thank you again for your contribution, and like Elizabeth, reminding us of the professional expertise that you've got, vigilance and communication. The importance of those cannot be underestimated. That's my response, I think, Chair, to all those who have contributed to the debate. I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Grace. So we will move on to the vote. This is a vote by simple majority, and the motion is before you in your order papers. Once again, I'm not going to read it out. You all have it there. So I'll hand over to Matthew to deal with the voting.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, when you're ready, I think we are ready for this poll. Marvellous, that is now published and on your screens. It is a vote of the entire governing body, and it is a simple majority vote, so please do start voting. There are 15 seconds left on this vote. Okay, thank you, Mike. You can close the vote. And I can confirm that the 2020 safeguarding policy has been approved in accordance with the motion set out in the order papers and commended unanimously. There are 100 votes in favour, none against, no abstentions. Thank you very much.
If I could add, Chair, by interrupting you, how grateful I am for that unanimous support for something so important. Joel.
Yes, indeed. I echo that sentiment too. Thank you very much indeed. There was a question which I did notice on the chat room. If you're voting yes, you're voting that you agree with the motion. I think that's the way in which these motions are worded. Okay, thank you very much. We will move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is agendum 16 in the present order paper. This is ministry statistics. This is a simple motion that the governing body do note the ministry statistics set out in the report. I'll get it right before we end this debate. The Bishop of Monmouth is proposing. Bishop Cherry, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone who's listening. This report gives us a snapshot of various indicators in relation to our ordained and lay ministers and those in training. I understand that the data used to be gleaned from what was the Board of Mission and Ministry and now comes out of the Information Department at Callaghan Square. The information, as you'll see, is about 2 years old now, but it does provide us with some trends up until the end of 2018. The graphs and grids speak for themselves and may be useful starters for discussion within each of our 6 dioceses. For today, I just want to draw your attention to 2 areas of information that we have. The first is around the age profile of our clerics. If you've got your report to hand and turn to page 3, you'll see that we're given the age profile of all active clerics and can see that there's a marked difference in the number of those who are under 46 and those who are over 46. I've done my sums, and there are 89 active clerics between the ages of 26 and 45, and 468 who are between 46 and 84. If we then turn to page 7 and look at the age profile of our ordinands, we can see that a younger category has appeared, and there were in 2018 4 ordinands under the age of 26, which is excellent news. The graph is also flatter than the one on page 3, although the difference is still there. 22 of those in training are between 20 and 45, 40 are between 46 and 78. The one other area to draw your attention to is the final one on page 8, which charts the numbers of LLM readers. And you'll see a steady decline in both the number of readers and the number of readers in training. And I know that this decline has continued since 2018, with only 2 readers being licensed across the province this year. This, of course, raises questions as to the degree to which the Church in Wales wants LLM readers as part of its ministerial provision, and how we can encourage more people to offer themselves for this ministry, if indeed this is what we want. I don't want to make any particular judgments about the graphs and grids here, except to say to the governing body that they do raise questions which we are discussing as a bench and with the directors of ministry, and that, as I said earlier, they may provide material for useful discussion at a diocesan level. Chair, I commend the report to the governing body and invite them to take note.
Thank you very much indeed, Bishop. I will formally second this motion from the chair. So I open it up to debate. If anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question, then please raise your hand now, and Simon Lloyd will call you in the order, in an appropriate order. So I hand over to you, Simon. Are there any wishing to speak? You're muted, Simon.
Tried so hard not to make that mistake. I call Moniz Farah.
Your Grace, bench of bishops and colleagues of the governing body. My question, Moniz Farah, Archdeacon for New Christian Communities in Diocese of St. David's. I noticed this in the first attempt in our first meeting about the numbers. And I actually put a question to that paper, and I hope that we will have an answer. That's the breakdown between the NSM and the stipendiary ministry clerics, age group wise. I don't think that was provided, which actually will skew our numbers big time. So it's just a question. Of course, I might have got it wrong, but if I haven't, it would be really helpful to receive that if you can today, if not by an email. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There are currently no other hands raised. Oh, yes, there is. I call Miriam Beecroft.
Miriam Beecroft, Bangor Diocese. We used to look forward to the year 2020, didn't we, at governing body? We used to do a lot of discussing about commissioning the report and then implementing the report. And now 2020 has turned out to be quite the nightmare. However, now that we've got to this late stage of 2020, I'd like us to really think about what we're aiming for now, because we've done 2020 almost, and we really, really need to be thinking further ahead now. Looking at the age profile of clerics, as Bishop Cherry was drawing our attention to, all of these statistics are looking back. They're looking some as far back as the early 2000s. But if we just change the age columns at the bottom on the age profile and put it on 10 years, we can easily project to what's going on in 2028. We've got in front of us the age profile of the leadership of the Church in Wales in 2028. And that's an awful lot of clerics who've retired. Absolutely loads, and it's not quite offset enough by the number of ordinands registered in 2018. So what are we aiming for? What is the plan now that we've reached 2020? Are we aiming for a church in Wales which is planning? Is it part of the plan to have so many less clergy? Is it therefore part of the plan that we should, if we're going to have a third less clergy, that we would have a third more lay licensed ministers? And if that is the plan, let's state it as the plan and make that our vision. If it's not, let's come up with something even more exciting and definite.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there anyone else wishing to speak, Simon?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay, well, if nobody else wishes to make a comment or ask a question, I will call on Bishop Cherry once again to ask if she wishes to say anything to those two comments.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Monis, for your question. I think if you turn to page 1, the very first section, you will see the breakdown that I think you are asking for, both in numbers and in trends. I think that's probably what you were asking for. If it isn't, perhaps you just let us know in writing and we can look at addressing the question that you've asked. But there is a breakdown there between stipendiary and non-stipendiary clerics on section 1, page 1. Miriam, in terms of your question about what we're aiming for, I think that's probably a question not just for me as one of the bishops, but a question for the whole bench and indeed for the whole church. I don't think any of us are under any illusions that we face considerable challenges ahead. I don't think any of us are very clear about what we're going to find ourselves in once we're the other side of the pandemic. But I do sense a desire amongst the bench for ministry areas that are served by both ordained and lay ministers. And as far as I'm picking up so far, there is a real commitment both to ordained ministers and to licensed lay ministers, and indeed to commissioned lay ministers as well. I think we need a diversity of ministry to serve us going forward. But in terms of an overall plan, I know 2020 was a big thing for many years, probably for a decade or more. We certainly do need another plan looking forward for the next 5-10 years at least. And that's something that the bench will be looking at both in their own diocese and as a bench on behalf of the province as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Bishop. So we now move on to the vote. Once again, this is a vote by a simple majority, and the motion is a very simple one too, that the governing body do note the ministry statistics, so I still can't say it, set out in the report. So if you vote yes, you agree with that statement. If you vote no, you do not. That, I think, is the way in which we're doing it. So I think before I've even asked him, Matthew has arranged for the vote to be up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, the vote has been published by our behind-the-scenes team and is open. We will keep it open for a minute as usual, so please do get voting on that. Fifteen seconds on this vote. Thank you very much. If you can close that vote, Mike. So the motion that the governing body do note the ministry stats set out in the report, get around it that way, has been passed with 96 votes in favour, no votes against, and 1 abstention. So that's an MCon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you everyone. We move on to the next item on the agenda, Agenda 17. This is the annual report of the Widows, Orphans and Dependents Society. Once again, a simple motion that the governing body do take note of the report. You've had the report, and it's going to be presented, and the motion proposed by the Archdeacon of Wrexham, the Venerable Andy Grimwood. So I call upon him.
Good afternoon. I'm actually the Archdeacon of St. Asaph. But
I do apologise. I have been misinformed.
No problem.
Please accept my apologies.
No problem. You should all have received a copy of the annual report and accounts for the Widows, Orphans and Dependents Society for the Church in Wales. The Provincial Widows, Orphans and Dependents Society was established in 1931. And since that time has provided financial assistance to widows, orphans and dependents of deceased clergy who have previously served in the ministry of the Church in Wales. The Provincial Society has close contact with each of the 6 diocesan committees, whose members have a more personal relationship with those in their care and are aware of individual needs. Both the Society and the diocesan committees concentrate their efforts in helping those in greatest financial need, with the total annual income of the Provincial Society apportioned between the dioceses. Each year, the Society set minimum income levels for widows, orphans and dependents, which for 2019 were set at $14,800 and $14,745 respectively. Using these criteria, grants totaling some £83,000 were distributed in 2019, for which the recipients are extremely grateful, as it makes a significant difference to their finances and makes life that little bit easier. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each of the diocesan societies for the pastoral work they undertake. Many of them visit the grantees on a regular basis, which is much appreciated by those who live alone. The work of the Society continues to make a difference to those in need, and if you feel you could help in some way, either financially by making an annual donation or pastorally, then if you could contact Louise Davis in the RB for further details. So I would commend the report to the governing body.
Thank you very much indeed to the Archdeacon of St. Asaph. I formally second this from the chair and open the motion out for debate. If anyone wishes to speak, make a comment, ask a question, please put your hands up now. And once again, I hand over to Simon Lloyd to call any who wish to make a comment.
There are no raised hands.
Thank you very much indeed. Since no one has said anything, does the Archdeacon of St. Asaph wish to say anything more?
No, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. So this goes to the vote. The motion is that the governing body do take note of this report. Voting yes means that you do take note. Voting no means that you don't. I hand over to Head of Legal Services once again.
We have just published that poll. Again, it is a vote of the entire governing body requiring a simple majority. So please do get voting. There are 20 more seconds. Thank you, Mike. You can close this one. That motion has been passed unanimously, 96 in favour, none against, no abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We're getting through the business quite well this afternoon, and thank you to everyone for assisting in that. The next item, agenda 18 on the order paper, is report of the University of Wales Trinity St David. Once again, a simple motion that the report of the University of Wales Trinity St David be received. The proposer of this motion is the Bishop of St David's, Bishop Joanna.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to propose the motion that governing body receive the report of the University of Wales Trinity St David. I think it's a very inspiring report and sets out clearly that the University of Wales Trinity St David has a real vision, not just to be a provider of education for people in their formative years, but to be one that continues to provide education for people relevantly within their workplace, and to be a body that inspires and transforms the community in which it's set, both West Wales and Swansea. And I do hope you take time to read and appreciate, and you'll see so much work going on. The second cohort of police recruits started their new roles as police officers while studying for a professional qualification. All this going on, as well as people receiving bachelor's and master's in the normal way. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the university, because in the report it says it's been recognised as a real living wage employer. University of Wales Trinity St David's plays a real role in transforming the lives of those people who pass through it, but also is intense and has a vision for transforming the community in which it's based. So I commend this report to governing body.
Thank you very much indeed, Bishop Joanna. I once again formally second the motion from the chair and open it up to debate. Again, if you'd like to raise your hand, if you wish to ask a question or make any comment, then please do so now. Simon.
I call Bishop Gregory.
Mr. President, members of governing body, brothers and sisters in Christ, Gregory Cameron, Bishop of St Asaph. We got to that stage of governing body when we have miscellaneous reports, and you're probably looking forward to the end of the Zoom conference and the end of governing body. But these reports are worth having, are worth receiving. And I know that the Church in Wales is very proud of the link that it has with Trinity St David. However, I have asked before, and I ask again, is there any way in which we could encourage the university to report in a way which is more directly tailored to the interests of the Church in Wales? We'd like to know, I think, more about how they encourage faith and faith communities within their life. We'd like to learn more about chaplaincy in Trinity St David. We'd love to hear perhaps from one or two of their students who could present to us how they see spirituality operating in the life of the university. I fully support this report. I'm grateful for the role that the Bishop of St David's has in the life of the university. But could I ask the university to engage with us more directly about things which animate us and about which we'd like to learn in the life of the university? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop Gregory.
There are no further hands raised.
Thank you very much. In which case I ask Bishop Joanna, do you wish to say anything in reply to?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
I would just like to say that if Bishop Gregory would email me with the specific points he made, then I will make sure the Vice-Chancellor has notice of them, and we hope to see those in next year's report to us. And I can answer myself on chaplaincy, in that the chaplaincy of the campuses in Lampeter and Swansea have just been amalgamated, and the Reverend Emma Whittick, who was chaplain in the Lampeter campus, is now chaplain at both the Lampeter campus and the Carmarthen campus, being based in Carmarthen. And in the Lampeter campus, we've got a new project that Archdeacon Moniz is encouraging, whereby we hope to have interns there who will be working evangelistically and in chaplaincy on the campus, but also themselves receiving training as they do it. So I can give you a little encouragement about that, but it would be good to see that sort of thing in the report. So I will, if you email me, I will pass that along, Bishop Gregory.
Thank you very much indeed. Once again, then, we move to the vote. The decision is a simple majority of the governing body as before. The motion is that the report of the University of Wales Trinity St David be received. So you vote yes to say that you receive it, or no to say that you do not wish to receive it. Head of Legal Services. There we are.
Thank you. The vote is now live, and advance warning, it's going to be open for 45 seconds this time. Everybody seems to be voting well within that, so we can save 15 seconds of our afternoon. There are 15 seconds remaining. Okay, Mike, please close that vote. Thank you. The motion has passed with 95 votes in favour and 1 vote against, with 0 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then, Addendum 19 on your order paper is the report of the Overseas Mission Fund. Once again, a simple motion to receive this report, and this will be proposed by the Archbishop, Your Grace.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. On the report, in the inside cover, you have the details of the purposes, the objects and aims for which this fund exists. Tomorrow and Friday, I will be involved in the meeting of the primates of the Anglican Communion. And one of the things which those meetings remind me of, the great needs which the Church and other agencies face in places far, far less well provided for than we. And so although the amount of grant aid that we give is sometimes minimal, whatever is given is always hugely appreciated. It might help you understand that over the last 3 years or so, we've given grants in the region of £20,000 in total to a variety of diverse beneficiaries. For example, we've sent a theological library of a retired Welsh bishop to the Diocese of Bukavu in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to help them with their theological training. Facilities which we have for that are obviously far more advanced than theirs. And so a simple gift of that nature. We've helped with the medical training of a doctor in Lango. The Diocese of Banga has a partnership with Uganda, and assistance has been given there. We've given help to a theological institute recover from an explosion in Beirut. We have helped the Archbishop of Canterbury's Anglican Communion Fund Together in Unity appeal, which has helped places far less well provided for than ours recover from the COVID pandemic, and so on. So it's not a huge amount of money, but the ways in which it's received are always very moving, and the objects for which the money is paid are diverse and thoroughly consonant with the gospel. So I have enormous pleasure, despite the fact that, as Bishop Gregory has reminded us, we're at the end of our agenda. The amount of money given is not huge, but this is a very, very important area of life and demonstrates the compassion and kindness of the Church in Wales to other places. So it gives me great pleasure to propose the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Your Grace. I formally second the motion from the Chair and open this up for debate. If anyone wishes to comment or ask a question, now is your opportunity.
There are no hands raised at present, but I'm aware that in the previous votes, someone was keen to come in and just missed the votes.
I will wait for
No,
a moment.
Chair, there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do you wish to add anything, Your Grace, before I go to the vote?
Only to say that the absence of speakers indicates unanimous support.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm looking forward to a century, but I'm not sure we'll get there.
Well, we shall see. It's possible. So we move to the vote then. Simple majority, once again, of the governing body. The motion that the governing body do take note of this important report. And I'll hand over to Matthew to put up the vote for you now.
Thank you. This will also be open for 45 seconds. There are 15 seconds left. Thank you, Mike. You can close that vote. Yes, it was unanimous, Archbishop. Not quite a century, I'm afraid. 94 in favour, none against, no abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Comment has been made that we're at the end of our agenda now, and it's often recognised when we meet physically that people do often anticipate the end and slip away to catch trains and so on and go home early. I'm very impressed with the fact that the number of participants, if my screen is accurate, has continued almost as it was this morning. So very few have stopped participating, and I thank you all for being present right to the end of this agenda. Well, we're not quite at the end because I hand back the chair to the Archbishop.
Thank you
very much indeed, Your Grace.
Thank you, Stephen. I hope that the number of participants won't suddenly dwindle now that I'm back in the chair with our final remarks.
I make no comment.
No, I'm sure you're far too polite. If I can remind, please, members of the governing body that our next meeting is scheduled to take place on the 14th and 15th of April 2021. At the moment, it's hoped that that will be based at City Hall in Cardiff, but it may be online, and the Standing Committee will be reviewing options for that meeting when it meets at the end of this month. And we're still planning an in-person meeting again, hopefully, for September, and that would be in Swansea. There are a couple of farewells which are well deserved, and the first is for someone actually who's not present with us today, but would have been was present with us when we met earlier in the year. The Dean of Newport, as he became, having formerly been the Dean of Monmouth, the very Reverend Lister Tong, retired earlier in this year, and I just want to pay tribute to him for a number of the contributions that he's made to the life of the province. Lister came to Newport after having a varied ministry in a number of different places. He was ordained in the Church of England and served in Liverpool. He served as precentor of the cathedral in Johannesburg in South Africa. He was a member of the Community of the Resurrection. He has a particular interest in a very important area of life, which is that surrounding modern slavery. And some of you may remember the contribution which he made when he spoke about the work of the CLUA initiative at governing body, and listed as a trustee of that. On a more local note, he led with considerable courage the reordering project of the cathedral in Newport. And for those of you who have not yet seen the interior of Newport's cathedral, it's well worth a look because the transformation there has been really quite remarkable. So we wish Lister well in his retirement in Liverpool and thank him for his work here in Wales. And then there's a farewell, but not quite a farewell, and that's to Liz Perkins. I've got her Christian name very, very heavily underlined in my order paper because, as some of you will remember, for some unknown reason, I constantly call her Sue Perkins. But Liz is stepping down as the chair of the standing committee after having served in that post for 4 years. She's not stepping down as a member of governing body, so we won't lose her expertise and her experience, but it's very, very appropriate indeed for me to thank her for her leadership of the standing committee over that period of time. I'm sure that all members of the governing body would join with me in thanking both see, I nearly did it, Liz and Lister for all that they've contributed. If I could say, if there are people, this can sometimes happen, who we miss when they depart the governing body, it's always worth drawing attention to that as and when people do part company with us in that way. Then if I can move on to other thanks, I'm sure that everybody has been relieved, but also impressed with a very, very smooth way in which this meeting has been able to be conducted through the medium of technology. We had a couple of little blips with the translation, and I'm sure that if we have to meet in this way in the future, that would have been ironed out. But overall, it's been absolutely magnificent. And I want to pay tribute to Leon, Mike, Paul, Alex, Ryan, Jonathan, Brad from the IT department for all the work that they've put in to enabling that success to happen. I'm immensely personally grateful to you because I'm sure that you've crossed fingers, toes, and everything you could possibly cross to ensure that that happened. I've already mentioned that we have had a couple of issues with the translation facility, and that's meant that we've heard very little, sadly, in Welsh. But Tudur has been as vigilant as ever. I'm sorry, Tudur, that the technology wasn't quite up to speed to help, but we're very grateful to you for the way in which you are always willing, ready, and able to assist us. Then I must thank those who've contributed either by leading worship or participating in our worship in the course of this meeting. In terms of letting others know about what's gone on at this meeting, highlights will be available on the Church in Wales website, hopefully within 2 weeks' time. I'm looking for a nod from the gallery as to whether there will be hard copies of highlights produced as usual as well. Not this time. I'm getting not getting a shake of the head. In which case, do please make it known that the online version of highlights will be made available. During the course of the meeting, I did have an email from Canon Carol Wardman, who very politely has asked me if I could simply draw to the attention of governing body members the ongoing existence of our centenary fund. As we've heard in relation to finances in other quarters, COVID-19 has had an impact on that. I do hope that we'll be able to draw to people's closer attention the aims of the centenary fund, that we don't fall short in the commitment we've made in that particular respect. And on an entirely personal note, the one disadvantage of our meeting online is that the Archbishop has failed to receive his usual bottle of beer, which just used to mysteriously appear on my table at a given point at the governing body. If the anonymous benefactor is with us and online, my postcode is LD3 9DJ. LD3 9DJ. I can actually say Lima Delta Juliet. No, Lima Delta 3 9 Delta Juliet. Please take careful note and pack whatever it is very carefully. So, to end where we began, I did my best to remind you of our ongoing commitment to renewing our song, to holding fast to what we are called to be, and not to be, going back to the book of Numbers, rather like the rabble who wanted to go back to where things were so much easier. We're not called to that. We're called to be faithful, to keep faithful, and to carry on. I'd ask you to hold that thought in your minds, to turn to stillness for a moment or two, and then I will give you the blessing. But Canon Stephen Kirk has appeared largely on my screen, and I think it would be right for me to actually thank Stephen particularly for his careful stewarding and chairmanship of this meeting in so many different ways, and of course to all the administrative staff at Callahan Square for their utterly reliable contributions and support for our meeting. But let's turn to stillness, and I'll then pronounce the blessing. May your minds hold fast to the wisdom of God the Father. May your hearts hold fast to the love of God the Son. May your entire being hold fast to the grace of God the Holy Spirit, that you may bear fruit for God's kingdom and show yourselves to be faithful and courageous disciples. Abendith du holflathiol, the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you and remain with you always. Ewch mewn tangnefydd. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. In the name of Christ. Amen. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you all very much indeed. I can't wish you a safe journey, but just be careful when you stand up. God bless.